It's all just sat here. That's the main fuse box. Popping that cover off, which was just held on by a couple of blobs of silicone, it has no passenger's airbag. So that's kind of interesting. So all of these Loom, all of these connections are now unplugged. What's good, guys? It's Ollie back on Project Race Car. Welcome back to another episode of the Evo 5 build. Now today we're going to get straight into it and rip the wiring harness out of the car like I said in the previous episode. So originally I planned to mount the fuse box under there, but I decided against that. It wasn't such a good idea. So pretty much everything is just thrown here for the time being, and I need to get under the dash and pull. The ECU's unplugged, but yeah, I need to get under the dash, remove the blower motor and things, which is, if you watched the Speed Academy video when they were doing the Evo 6 build, apparently the Loom is pretty complex, and it plugs into the AYC ECU and the airbag ECU and stuff that's under the center console. So I've never done this before, so you're going to be coming along for the ride, and hopefully if you guys are wanting to do this to your 5 or 6 or 4 or whatever, hopefully this little bit of a wiring tutorial will help out, because pretty much every single time I post up pictures of the engine bay, I always get asked, oh, how'd you do the wire and tuck? How'd you do the wire and tuck? So it's not going to be a sort of tutorial as such, but I'm going to do it in a way that you guys could probably follow, just to get the ugliness of this Mitsubishi overly complex wiring loom out of the engine bay and out of harm's way. So yeah, it's all just sat here. That's the main fuse box. That's your air conditioning fuse box. There's a few little fuses in here, but basically what I want to do is inspect it all, tear it all down. There's a little bit of a mishap I had back here, and I want to repair that properly. I was cleaning the bay with a grinder and accidentally got it caught, and it cut through a couple of wires. So I want to repair that properly whilst I've got the Loom out of the car, and just go about there. So we'll go in the car and we'll start ripping it out. Okay, so this is inside the car, and this should be where this panel goes. As you can see on there is where the airbag used to go. Now, I always thought that this car had a passenger's airbag, no driver's airbag, but turns out, popping that cover off, which was just held on by a couple of blobs of silicone, it has no passenger's airbag. So that's kind of interesting. But since I'm going to be running a harness bar and harnesses in this car, I'm not too bothered about the fact that it doesn't have airbags. So what we're going to do is repurpose this space up here and find out a way of hinging this cover somehow so that it'll open like that, and then we'll mount the fuse box in here. And then that means that we've got easy access to the fuses. We don't have to take the bumper off to get to them like we'd had to with the old setup. So this is just much more convenient. It's inside the car, it's out of harm's way, out of the way of water, and it just keeps the fuse boxes out of the engine bay and just makes the engine bay look much tidier, much neater, a lot less going on, and it just moves them into a place that's much more convenient to deal with. But unfortunately, to do that, down here is the ECU plugs, and like I showed you earlier, the ECU is in behind here in a little black box. That's where the link goes back to in the standard location, and these are the ECU plugs here. But if you've watched the Speed Academy video, which I'm probably going to reference to quite a lot, I'm pretty sure this blower motor box assembly has to come out, and then there's a lot of plugs in underneath the center console here for the AYC ECU and the airbag ECU and things that have got to be unplugged as well before the entire loom can be pulled out through the hole in the engine bay. So yeah, let's get to it. So to remove, Chloe is here, my girlfriend, just so that you know if you hear anybody talking in the background. So to remove the dash on a 4, 5 or 6, it's actually pretty simple. Remove the 2 vents, driver side and passenger side, and you've got 2 10mm bolts behind the vents. Then you've got 2 10mm at the bottom that secure the brackets to the sides. You can take all the trims off and pieces if you like. Take the stereo out of the centre console, and you've got these brackets which you can either remove with the dash or leave bolted in place, as you can see here. And they bolt to this centre bar, the top here, and also down onto the transmission tunnel. And there's a few plastic clips and a few plugs, and if yours has been messed with, or it's got stuff like a turbo timer and things wired in, then you'll have excess wiring running across. Or like we had a green and a red wire that were spliced into different things, which we've had to cut and label so that we can join them back together again. To get the Hvac box out is really easy. You've got 3 12mm bolts, 3 12mm nuts, one that secures there, one that secures there, and one that secures underneath. And like we had, if yours has had an aircon delete, mine had this little plate that somebody has custom made to blank off the where the aircon lines connect to through the firewall. So yours may not have this, but in this case this was stopping this coming out, so I had to take that off. But then the airbox just pulls out and slides out of the way, and then that means we can get at the wiring that runs to the AYC ECU and the airbag controller underneath, and get to what we need to get to. So all of these Loom, all of these connections are now unplugged. It runs like right underneath all of the sensors over here, and like a couple of little ECUs. And then it also connects to the main ECU, which is under here. So whilst I'm under here and the dash is out, I'm going to put the link in, because it makes total sense to put the link in. And there's a few ground connections, so just make sure we've labelled everything. Well, more or less everything. I know what they are because they're the main ECU plugs. So what we're going to do now is pop it through the firewall and pull the whole lot out that way.
Oh lordy.
I've caught an octopus! So, the wiring loom is all removed from the car. It is actually 2 pieces. I thought it was originally one whole complete loom, but it turns out that this is one separate loom, and then the actual like engine / ECU side is one whole loom, and it sort of runs out one side, runs all the way around, runs back in again, then connects to something behind the dash, and then it sort of like does a loop and connects and does like a whole 360 inside the car. So I'm sure it's it's more complex than it needs to be, but we've done quite a bit on this side of the loom, so this bit should be fine. We're just going to address this bit here, and hopefully, if I can get away with it, remove the fusible link from the engine bay altogether and mount that behind the dash as well, and run the battery cable up to that rather than running it into the engine bay. And then yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and strip all of this down and reorganize it how we see fit. And if I can leave the ABS relays and stuff that were otherwise up behind the ABS pump, then I will put those in behind the dash as well, behind this grommet. So we'll see how we get on anyway. Whilst we're in here and the ECU is easy enough to access, we're going to pull it out. So I've already taken it out of the packet, or out of the casing. So if you've ever done this, or you ever need to do this, they've got this little plastic like casing thing, and the metal bracket that actually bolts it to the car is just slotted in like that, and there's 2 little grooves. So just put a screwdriver in the top here, bend the grooves out slightly, and you can slide the metal plate right off of the casing. And then there is 1, 2, 3, 4 clips, and then those clips allow the ECU to simply just slide out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put that to the side. We're going to grab the new link, and I think we have to drill some holes in the casing to run the connector for the CAN lambda, and also which I think that's the CAN lambda, and the 7-bar map sensor. We have to run that out of the back of the casing. So I'm going to do some reading on that and we'll go from there. So I've got the Link G4x installed in the original OEM casing, relatively easy to do. However, I've only got this nice thick wall vacuum line, and it was a bit tight and it pinched it a bit coming out of the fascia plate. So I've drilled a hole in the back of the original casing and run it straight out the back for no kinks or anything, which should make it a little bit more accurate. And yeah, because these have got a 7-bar built-in map sensor, I don't know why you need a 7-bar map sensor, but there we go. And then I've just got the USB tuning cable coming out of the front of the casing like you're supposed to. But it's all installed, and obviously I've stuck a Link sticker over the OEM Mitsubishi part number, and the original brackets back on. So let's throw it back in the car. Okay, so that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode of the Evo 5 build. Now we've got, well, a lot of the wiring and pretty much everything that I need of the wiring done. There's still a battery cable and a few other bits and bobs that need to be run, but this is pretty much the extent of all of the engine bay wiring now. So there's not much more than that, which compared to how it used to run all the way around the bay and everything, you know what it was like. It was pretty horrendous. So now with it all tucked behind the dash, it's much better. So let me just quickly show you what we ended up with, because when I stopped filming we were about 2 and a bit days in, and the whole job ended up taking probably closer to 5. So let me show what we ended up with. Now it is still a work in progress, because there's still a bracket down here that needs to go on the other side of the dash. But for the most part, if you take the SOS airbag cover out, in there is your fuse box and the other fuse box where the air conditioning stuff lives, which most of it's been ripped out now because obviously we're not running air conditioning in this car. So that's where the fuse box ends up. This car never had a passenger's airbag, turns out, when I bought it anyway, so I don't feel too bad about taking it out. But all of the wiring is now tacked up underneath the Hvac system, and there's a couple of relays that have been relocated up underneath the center console, and this is one plug that I have left that needs to be extended, and that's for the radiator fan. But that's pretty much it, and then the rest of the dash just has to go back together again. So if you're really anal like me and you want to get it all out of the engine bay, then that's pretty much the only way to do it. Would I do it again? Probably not, no. So there's that. So just to give a little bit more background before I wrap this video up, so behind the dashboard is obviously a big white bar, as you would have seen when I took the dash out in the previous part of this video. But basically how the wiring loom is run behind the dash is now the parts that need to be over in this footwell, like the relays and bits and bobs that have been relocated underneath the center console. That wiring loom is where it originally was, where it ran back through the firewall on this side. And so what I've basically done is I've put the entire loom in the footwell here, and I've ran the section that used to run around the front of the engine bay and back in through the firewall on the driver's side and plugged into the fuse box there. I've ran that over the top of the white bar underneath the dashboard, along the white bar where another wiring loom for the interior harness runs as well, and then run it down the side and plugged everything into the fuse box over there and run it over the top of the dashboard rather than around inside the engine bay. So everything for the engine bay harness with all the lights and stuff is all run underneath the dashboard, and it's all run along that white bar, and it plugs in everywhere, and then what needs to run through the firewall runs through. And then stuff like the indicator harnesses and things have been extended, reusing a hole in the grommet. They are ran through a grommeted hole there, up underneath the wheel arch, and they are conduited and P-clamped for the headlight harnesses, which are there, and the horns on the front. And then on the other side it's exactly the same, apart from it runs through the hole in the firewall, which needs to be grommeted there, and runs up underneath and is P-clamped and riv nutted, and also the immobilizer is round as well. So that's where all of the
connectors go.
So yes, hopefully that's shed some light on how I personally tidied up the wiring loom on the Evo. So yeah, I'm going to leave it here, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Evo 5 build. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button. It helps us out a ton. And stay safe, everybody, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.